Hello everybody, Shinjo here, welcome back to the channel, and at the moment, with no long-running Yu-Gi-Oh! Happening besides the Yu-Gi-Oh! Chronicles thing, which I heard is very mixed from a lot of people, I thought it would be a good idea to go through all of the Yu-Gi-Ohs and list off my top 10 favorite characters. I already discussed my top 10 favorite characters as a whole after 7th ended, but first of all, that list is outdated at this point. Secondly, Go Rush has officially came and went, and more importantly, that encompassed all 7 Yu-Gi-Ohs at the moment. So unfortunately, there were characters that didn't really get as much attention as I would have preferred in that video. So here comes a new series on the channel where I run through my top 10 favorite characters from each Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm going to start at Go Rush because it's the most recent, and then work my way backwards to eventually get to Duel Monsters. Now obviously, like every single one of these that I'm going to do, there will most likely be spoilers with any of these characters, but I'm not going to shy away from mentioning specific things unless it's really big for the plot. I mean, honestly, with this one, I can't really avoid spoilers, and you'll find out why later on. So, let's begin. At number 10 is Mitsuko. So, I wanted to try and make this list a little bit differently from Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything's, because I did watch his video. Now, the outlier that he included that's different from mine is Zion, which I do like Zion, sure, but I do like Mitsuko as well. She's got a really appealing design, and first of all, she's way taller than 90% of the cast, which is hilarious. The unfortunate part is, while I do like her and the pun with her monsters' names, her crush on Zuijo turned into a joke later on, and I really didn't like that. I really do like Mitsuko's design for a bunch of different reasons. Don't take that out of context. But I just wish that her whole thing with Zuijo wasn't just played off as a joke. And speaking of a joke, number 9 is Manabu Sogetsu. So, I will say that while he's similar to Mitsuko, where he started out really cool but turned into a joke, I think it honestly is worse for Manabu, because he had good moments early on in the show. He had the moment where he dueled Udius early on in the show. He had a lot of moments where he turned away when Ranma was trying to escape and let her escape. But unfortunately, his first duel with Zuijo is where things kind of got rough. He just kind of fell apart at that point, and it just felt like there was no turning back. It's unfortunate, but he just turned into a joke, and the climax of his season with dueling his ancestor didn't really help the situation. I do like Manabu, but I just felt bad for him, honestly. At number 8, we have Goha Yuna. This is certainly an interesting case because it's the exact opposite of Mitsuko and Manabu. I didn't really like her at the start. She didn't really have much of a presence besides being a Rovian simp. But as the show went on, she did turn into an interesting character. Whether that's a good character or a bad character, I'll let you be the judge. Personally, I think it was interesting what they did with her. And honestly, it felt like she was just trying to be her own person, stepping out of the shadow of characters like Rovian, for example. Plus, it doesn't necessarily hurt that she has ties to Yuga, for better or for worse. I think the only rough patch that she has in the second half of the show is the duel where almost everybody is a baby, and the way that they ended her, where it's just they find her in the previous time and they just kind of forgive her. That was a bit weird, but overall she was an interesting character, so I feel like including her in the top 10 is at least fair. But at number 7, and she's gonna be so mad that this character is above her, Asaka Matsuba. Honestly, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Asaka is kind of an underrated character in the show. While she doesn't really have many big moments, whether positive or negative, like Mitsuko, Manabu, or Goha Yuna, she's just always there. And it's really cool to see a character like Asaka where, while I will say that Asana from Sevens is personally a more interesting character for me, I do like how Asaka has nice moments that contrast between serious moments like her duel against Tazaki and funny moments like when she dueled Yuhi, when Yuhi's trying to force her to free the 8.88 million countrymen. And I didn't even mention the duel where Asaka dueled Yuumu, where they're trying to figure out who's the president. That was just hilarious to me, and I like how Asaka's, while not really a super standout character, she's still a really good character. At number 6, it pains me to do this, Yuumu Odo. So where do I even begin with Yuumu? I guess Season 1 is a good start. She started off as a really good character, a flawed character at that, where she's always thinking about the money and not really caring about anything else, but that's what made her interesting. Plus she uses the dragon deck, that's already another bonus. But after Season 2 is where things get rough, at least in my opinion. Anything that she would say that's any sort of being intelligent got relegated to Yuhi, and she just kind of felt irrelevant at that point. I would have liked if she actually did more in Season 2, but she didn't. But at the same time, the end of Season 2 and the start of Season 3 really makes up for it. I like her switch up, even though I'm still not entirely sure how to comprehend it. I do like that they did something different with Yuumu. At the same time, I'm not sure where I would have placed Yuumu if we just kept that trajectory from Season 1 all the way through. It may have been super predictable to have her not really grow at all, but at the same time, it is interesting what they did with her character, to say the least. Right in the middle of the list, the character on the thumbnail, you might not know it, is Epoch. So, Epoch is honestly scary to think, very similar to Goha Yuna. Her introduction is certainly a mixed bag for me, or I guess a mixed box in this case. I would say Epoch and Goha Yuna were both equal amounts of annoying, maybe Goha Yuna more because she literally resorted to violence, but Epoch going the whole tsundere sort of route, if you could even call it that, did get a little bit old, but as the show went on, it really turned out to be that Epoch is a really fun character, and I suppose the writers thought so too, otherwise they wouldn't have given Epoch as much screen time in Season 3 as they did. I think my favorite moment from Epoch is when Epoch dueled Manabu on the ship, where she literally broke out of the box and had that big moment. That was really cool. Although I do kind of like how Epoch dueled Yuhi and cheated to use the dice rolls, and she was just so tired at the end of it that she lost the duel because of it. But I don't know. I would say that Epoch is honestly an underrated hit for me. I really like Epoch, and while it is a little bit of a struggle to get through the early seasons of Epoch, I think Season 3 makes up for it. That it even made me feel bad when Epoch got sucked into the time machine. And number 4 is her tutor, Udius Velgear. I don't know, obviously I wouldn't know yet, but I haven't made the videos for the other 10 characters from the other shows, but this may be the furthest back a main character may be. Well, actually, maybe second time, because I have an idea of who may be the exception. But I will say, Udius is a really good character. Season 3, Udius is great. He actually shows some backbone and just doesn't care about anything. But unfortunately, kind of like Epoch, there are those early seasons of Udius where it's just to the point where he's oblivious to a ridiculous degree. I feel like I always bring it up, but when I think it's Yuhi and Zion are dueling, and Udius is on the massage chair and he's crying out in pain, whether it feels good or not, I don't remember. But the fact that those two are dueling and Udius is just screaming along the sidelines, it's just... I will admit there are some moments of Udius being ridiculously stupid that are interesting, but overall it's just kind of boring. Not boring, just annoying. Like, it gets to the point where I roll my eyes when I hear Udius call Chupataro his eternal friend. After the third time, you would think he would have caught on that Chupataro isn't exactly friendly. But I digress. Season 3 Udius is great. There are some really good moments sprinkled in between Season 1 and 2. But I may be a bit harsh on it, but it just feels like Udius is the shonen protagonist formula where he's just obliviously stupid to everything. And at number 3 is Kawaii Duel Velgear. I wasn't sure where to put Kawaii Duel, but I think right above Udius is fair. Honestly, I could flip-flop these two, but the fact that Kawaii Duel didn't show up until about halfway through the show and still cracks the top 3 is really telling. Well, technically he did show up, but that's only in voice speaking. But either way, Kawaii Duel is a really interesting character. He's got an air of unpredictability where you can never predict what Kawaii Duel is going to do next. And the fact that he was very symbolic to Udius' growth and the point where Udius got to be a really interesting character for me, I think that's reason enough to put Kawaii Duel at number 3. And the fact that his deck is really cool. The prime cards that are parallels to the other characters' cards, really cool. And at number 2, you may be wondering where he's at. Well, probably not. It's Yuhi Odo. So, Yuhi, I feel like I say this a lot. Yuhi's like a lot of other characters where you gotta push through Season 1 to get a really interesting character. Because first of all, Yuhi just turned into a punching bag, and then they relegated that to Manabu, but I digress. But Season 1 Yuhi's got a completely different voice. He probably loses a lot more duels than what he should. But then the next 2 seasons really help. Unfortunately, they sacrifice Yuamu's character development for part of it, but it kind of makes up for it. But like I mentioned before, that Udius is the shonen protagonist formula where he's just ridiculously stupid. Yuhi's the other half where he's constantly brooding. Well, at least in the early part of Season 2. I do think that Yuhi's switch up, I guess you could call it that, it makes sense because Yuhi wanted to help all this time in all Season 1, but he couldn't really do much. I mean, heck, he lost to Zuijo when he was on Luke's ship. But I think Yuhi kind of pushing himself away from Udius and everything involving it makes sense. And then, I'm not even going to speak about the Otis stuff with this, but I will say Yuhi is a character that I'm still kind of mixed on, where I'm not sure if it's too much Yuhi or not enough Yuhi or right in the middle, because it feels like whenever something needed to be taken care of, it was Yuhi. I don't know, it may be just me. But either way, Yuhi is not number 1, because number 1 is the one and only Zuijo Zervelgear. I honestly was going to put Yuhi at 1, but I feel like Zuijo deserves it much more. Because while Yuhi had a rough Season 1 but saved it in the last 2 seasons, Zuijo is just pretty solid all the way through. He's been intimidating since he showed up in Season 1, and his finale duel against Udius at the end of Season 1 is really good. And Season 2 and 3 didn't necessarily cast him aside like they did with characters like Yuamu. And while I will say that his Season 3 is a bit rough with following Otis around and stuff like that, I do still think overall he's a really good character. I love the cards that he uses. I love how he's just a no-nonsense character. And when you have characters like Goha Yuna simping for Rovian, Yuhi kind of being a balance between stupid and cool, and just all the other goofballs in the show, especially characters like Dinhwa. I think a character like Zuijo, where he's no nonsense, is really cool, especially to the point where Zuijo just lets his actions do the talking and doesn't really talk that much. It's just really cool. I really like Zuijo, and I think even with a rough Season 3, he deserves to be number 1. But that is my top 10 Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush characters. Let me know what you think. and I don't know exactly when I'm going to post the rest of them. I haven't even recorded them yet, but I probably will aim to do this maybe once a month, something like that. But if I don't, just know that I'm definitely going to get them out. It's just a lot of time getting the list together, especially with shows like Arc 5 where there's such a large cast. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you next time. Momentai.